You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Offered for your approval, one Donald J. Trump, famous for bad hair, orange skin, small hands, ties that are too long, and feet with bone spurs. Donald counts among his many careers building big buildings, owning big gambling casinos, hosting big-time wrestling events, and owning big beauty pageants. He can also count 3 marriages, 2 divorces, 5 children, and 6 big corporate bankruptcies. In 2016, something happened to Donald Trump that considerably altered his existence and ours. He found himself forced to move out of his fabulous 58-story tower in New York City and into a much less glamorous 2-story home in Washington, D.C. And when he did, he drug us all with him into the 2020 Twilight Zone.
Many baby boomers watching this video will likely remember seeing this 1965 ad from the back of a magazine, or at least lots of ones like it. Such ads prompted readers to become sponsors of a specific child in a poverty-stricken area of the world by committing to annual donations to help the child with a specific need. This ad was about a little boy in South Korea whose poor family needed a cow so they could plow their fields, grow rice, and thus afford to send little Boo Sun to school. If you donated to this project, or many others like it, you would get a photo of the child along with a detailed description of their life circumstances. And if you wanted to, you could even establish a communication directly with the child you sponsored and hear details of how your financial help improved their life. The organization posting the ad is still around today, still helping children and families and communities with needs caused by poverty in general or crises like earthquakes and floods and famines. It's the Save the Children Federation, founded in 1919 right after World War I, with the specific goal of helping children in war-torn countries put their lives back together from the ravages of the war. Here's an example of just one of their projects in 1948, by which time they were helping children put their lives back together after the ravages of that war. The sponsor who got this receipt had donated in order to help children in some school in a devastated area. The receipt is detailing how the sponsor's funds were used. Typical Save the Children Federation projects today include providing drinkable water in areas where it is scarce, medical services and supplies in areas struck by epidemics, and so on. Affiliated groups have been formed in many areas of the world who carry on similar work. Projects have broadened in the 21st century, including this one that provides legal help to immigrant children at the Mexican border in the U.S. And a major ongoing effort to save the children since the advent of the Internet is combating online child sexual exploitation that affects children around the world. Here is an ad for a summit on the issue sponsored by Save the Children and other child advocacy groups in the Philippines. Thus, it wasn't surprising to see information online in recent weeks in this summer of 2020 on various social media outlets such as Twitter with the hashtag Save the Children, announcing rallies to be held around the country aimed at the topic of ending child sex trafficking, such as this tweet about one about to start in Spokane, Washington on August 9th. Or this one 2 weeks later in the small town of Woodstock, Georgia, about 75 miles north of where I live. This Save the Children march had been organized online, as had many others across the nation, and people of all ages showed up there to carry signs and chant, Save the Children. But the minute I saw these photos in an online article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspaper about the event, I knew something odd was going on. I was right. The marches around the nation were not being sponsored by the well-known Save the Children Federation. In fact, I soon learned that the Save the Children Federation was really upset that their copyrighted name had been appropriated illegally to brand these marches. I also quickly learned that the groups that actually sponsored these events had, indeed, deliberately labeled them with that name in order to gain instant credibility for their plans. And why might they be concerned about credibility? The story is in some of the signs being held up by the marchers. "Epstein didn't kill himself. Who did?" read one. "What was on Congressman Anthony Weiner's laptop?" asked another. Wait, Anthony Weiner hasn't been a congressman since 2011, almost a decade ago. And a story about a laptop that involved Weiner was obviously from a situation that made the news clear back in 2016. Most people had totally forgotten about that incident in the intervening 4 years. Why was it being brought up now? And then there was this odd sign asking, "What the F is frazzle drip?" Look close and you'll see the faded lead-in question. What's in the thousands of emails in life insurance folder? What on earth was going on at this march in Little Woodstock, Georgia, population about 25,000 in central Georgia? What was going on was this, clarified in a headline in the August 29, 2020 edition of the online Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Supercharged theory QAnon takes root in Georgia. Last weekend's Save the Children march in Woodstock brought hundreds of people together for the stated purpose of raising awareness about the problem of sexual exploitation of children. Some marched with their families, many wore matching t-shirts and carried placards, but one man stood out more than the rest. First, he wore a gator mask covering most of his face, separating him from the mostly unmasked crowd. Second, his sign made one of the most direct references to the far-out web of conspiracy theories attributed to a cult-like phenomenon known as QAnon. WTF is frazzle drip, the sign read. It might read like nonsense to most people, but to the initiated, frazzle drip is a code word for the baseless belief that a video hidden on the laptop belonging to Hillary Clinton's longtime aide, Huma Abedin, shared by her husband, former Congressman Anthony Weiner, shows Hillary and Huma ritually sacrificing a child and drinking its blood. And thus we arrive joltingly at the topic of this episode of the 2020 Twilight Zone, QAnon, because a 2016 conspiracy theory connected to the computer of Anthony Weiner, which many people thought had just died out as a thing clear back in 2017, has sprung back to life as a part of the mysterious world of the movement known as QAnon, a world where you have to worry about humans sacrificing children and drinking their blood, or maybe even eating parts of their bodies, among many other strange things. And that's how we got to those nationwide rallies that seem to be sponsored by the reputable Save the Children Federation because, after all, the organizers were using the hashtag Save the Children on all their materials. When the real Save the Children organization threatened to sue the upstart groups, the new groups rebranded themselves quickly, literally overnight, to the slightly different hashtag of Save Our Children. Although organizers in some cities absolutely insisted that they had no connection to QAnon and just wanted to highlight the problem of sexual trafficking of children in general, the reality is that even if they didn't intend to promote QAnon, QAnon had definitely targeted their events for appropriation for their own propaganda, as is painfully obvious by many of the signs being carried in Save Our Children marches all over the country in August and September. Early in 2020, the percentage of the U.S. population who had even heard of the QAnon phenomenon was very low. But since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, something has happened. as you can tell from this Mother Jones magazine article from August 20th that declares this: the summer QAnon went mainstream. And it's not just in America. As you can see from this August 23rd article on an Australian news website, the phenomenon has migrated from its birthplace in America and hit Australia hard also. For over 20 years, I've been doing online research into American homegrown mass movements, particularly those at the intersection between religion and politics. I use my findings to create blog entries and YouTube video documentary material to share the results of my research with others. But QAnon is the first movement that I've studied that was literally spawned in the dark depths of the internet, and yet made its way out into the real world to become an influence to be reckoned with regarding the very future of our nation. I didn't realize at the time of my birthday on October 28th in 2017, something I later learned from my research. QAnon was born on that very same day, October 28th, 2017, although almost no one noticed it at the time. By early spring 2018, I had seen the term in a scattered few places on the internet where I regularly did research, but it only seemed like some minor little goofiness affecting only a few people on the fringes of American society and could only be found in nooks and crannies in obscure parts of the web. But I got a rude awakening on July 15, 2018, while riding along in the car with my husband from our home in central Georgia, south of Atlanta, up Interstate 75, to visit friends in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Just as we were about to pass Exit 1 on the freeway, going into Tennessee, there it was, a billboard. Oh, it probably wasn't even noticed by most people just looking to spot the exit so they could get off and find a Taco Bell for lunch. And it wasn't a big billboard, like the huge ones that feature brand name products like Pepsi. And it wasn't even a whole small billboard. It was sharing half of a billboard space with an ad for Dixieland fireworks. And its message was totally obscure. It just said hashtag QANON with a subtitle of Truth is Freedom. I'm going to guess 99% of the people passing by who even looked right at it were just totally bewildered what it was for. But I was aware what it was for immediately. I had read enough about QAnon at that point that I knew it was something that needed to stay in the shadowy corners of the internet, just to entertain a small number of wacky people who like dabbling in wacky ideas. And yet here it was. It had escaped the computer screen and entered the real world in my home state. I later found multiple photos online of that Georgia billboard, and this article on the Snopes website from June 29th, 2020, discussing it. The article described others besides me who had spotted the Georgia sign and understood the reference. It mentioned that others had seen this related QAnon sign a few weeks earlier alongside Interstate 35 in Oklahoma, out in the boonies about 20 miles north of the Texas border. And I knew at that moment that we were in for big trouble. Oh, not right away. These were tacky little vague signs out in fields in rural areas of just 2 states, so whoever was behind putting them up at that time wasn't very scary yet. But I knew the potential for the future, and I'm here to tell you that the scary future I saw 2 years ago has now arrived, and I'm seeing it in the headlines almost every day now. Most of my friends know about my research, so recently I began getting messages in email and on Facebook and in my circle of friends outside the internet asking me if I could help them understand this new weird thing they've been seeing mentioned more and more frequently. This video, and probably another 2 or 3 in a series, will be my answer to their pleas. In this introductory video to the series, we'll begin with an exploration of the background of this phenomenon. By the end of the series, you should be able to answer these 3 questions. What is QAnon? Where did it come from? Why should I care? But this topic is so important and so complex and has such serious implications for the future of the United States that I don't want to just offer glib, shallow answers. We need to establish a foundation of information that will make the final answers more fully formed. As I mentioned earlier, the phenomenon of QAnon didn't arise out in the historical real world we've all been used to all our lives. It was born and raised on the internet, in a sort of alternate realm, sometimes referred to as cyberspace. Because of this, to fully understand the answers to those three questions, we need to take a short detour to lay a foundation of terms that some people viewing this video, perhaps many, will not be familiar with. So I'm going to start with sharing with you an abridged internet terminology lexicon. There is no intent in this short lexicon to get all technical and sciencey on viewers. I don't pretend to be an expert on any of these topics. I just happen to know a bit more about it all than perhaps the average person who visits the net to chat with family and friends on Facebook or order something from Amazon. The definitions and descriptions are intended to be very simplified and in layman's language. We just need to have a common vocabulary of certain terms that will be helpful in order for some parts of the later explanation of QAnon to be understandable to the average American. So let's get started. The Internet is a huge global network of powerful computers that are able to send and receive messages and information among themselves, using a special communication system called the Internet Protocol Suite. The Internet is actually a network of networks. Smaller networks of private, public, academic, business, and government computers are all interconnected to create a gigantic international network that spans the whole Earth. Computer technology took off after World War II, and by the 1960s, the U.S. Department of Defense developed methods to allow the computers it was using to be able to share information and work together. By the 1970s, they'd pulled together what they called the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, or ARPANET for short, a growing network that used a system of communication that allowed efficient sharing among regional, academic, and military computer networks. It was the forerunner of the Internet we use today. By the 1980s, the National Science Foundation got into the act, creating wide networks of computers for use in research and education that combined with the ARPANET efforts to make a bigger and bigger system. At first, the foundation only allowed government agencies and universities to use the network. But then along came the explosion of the availability of home computers for use by the average citizen, and thus commercial forces in America began nagging for the information and communication abilities of all those educational and governmental resources to be made available to the common man. In 1989, the very first commercial service provider for home use became available. By 1991, the Science Foundation removed restrictions on access, and the business world went wild. The modern Internet was born. But wait, is the Internet just another name for the World Wide Web? No. The Internet is a vast global system of interconnected computer networks. The World Wide Web is a global collection of a subset of documents and resources stored on the Internet that are easily accessible to both experts using giant computers and to the average person in their home using their home computer or even their mobile telephone. The World Wide Web collection of documents and other resources is gigantic in one way, but only a small part of everything stored on the Internet. What is special about the World Wide Web resources is that they are accessed in a special way. Every item that's part of the World Wide Web has a special kind of digital address pointing to where it is stored, called an URL, for Universal Resource Locator. You see these all the time when you use the web. They look like the one you see here. The parts of this address give information to your computer and to all the computers on the network that it will communicate with across the earth on how to find the item you want to reach. For instance, if you type in the address you see here on the screen, your computer will take you to the website of the White House, where you will read, "President and Mrs. Trump are delighted to take part in the long-standing tradition of welcoming members of the public to tour the White House." That is, of course, unless there are civil disturbances outside. In that case, all the doors to the house will be locked, and Donald and Melania may have to retire to the White House bunker, in which case you'll need to reschedule your tour. The way the web's communication system among computers works to locate resources you want through the use of the system of URLs is sort of comparable to your car's GPS using information on street addresses to calculate a route and guide you to your travel destination. In order to use your computer to locate and then display for you the resources you reach by using URLs, you use a piece of software called a browser, such as Google Chrome or Firefox. These programs know how to locate and then display on your monitor what you want to see. Whether it's a display from the Weather Channel of the forecast paths of the latest hurricanes, or a video stored on YouTube of a Howdy Doody show from the 1950s. One other thing special about the World Wide Web that is not available on other parts of the Internet is a feature of documents called hyperlinks. You see these all the time when you are using the web too. They are either words or visuals like photos that are highlighted on the page in some way, often with a blue underlined font as you see here, and can be clicked on with your mouse. If you click on one of them, your computer immediately jumps automatically to somewhere else on the page, to somewhere else on the website you're on, or even to some totally different website halfway around the world. And one last thing that's special about the World Wide Web. By using software called a search engine, you can ask the gigantic network system of the web to search for a specific word or set of words or a photo or other resource in every computer in the whole world that makes up the huge network system of the web. Within seconds, you will get a long list of hyperlinks to click on to get to the address of web pages that include the search term you requested. Now that we've clarified the difference between the Internet and the World Wide Web, we need to take a closer look at three different parts of the web. ClearNet is not a term you see very often. In fact, I'd never heard of it before I started working on the narration for this video, but I can now see that it's a very useful term. The ClearNet is the face of the web that you use and see every day. In other words, it's the visible content or results that search engines like Google or Yahoo show you as search results. When you visit the National Geographic Society on the web, you are on the ClearNet. When you visit Amazon.com to buy something, you're on the ClearNet. When you visit a favorite comic strip site to get a daily dose of your favorite comics, you are on the ClearNet. And just to be clear on this, when you are on the ClearNet, you are pretty easy for lots of businesses and other web providers and authorities to track. Visit Amazon.com to browse for brown shoes, and by the time you get to the next website in your day, you'll find ads for brown shoes already there waiting for you. And if your computer is accessible to the rest of your family, you need to be pretty careful what sites you visit. Your teenage daughter may get an eyeful today of ads from some slightly shady website you visited yesterday. Just as the World Wide Web itself takes up only 10% or so of the whole Internet, the ClearNet takes up 10% or less of the web, as represented on this illustration of an iceberg. So what makes up the rest of the World Wide Web? A large proportion of it is the deep web. The deep web is the part of the web you can only get to if you can present the proper credentials to a website. For instance, your bank account information, including your account balances and all the purchases you made with your ATM card recently, is on your bank's website. It is not accessible to searches by Google or other search engines. You certainly wouldn't want people to be able to do a Google search on your name and your bank's name and be able to instantly see all the details of your account. And they can't, because it's stored in the deep web out of the view of search engines. To get to it, you have to register a request with your bank to make it accessible to you, provide adequate identification, and get a username and password that you will use after that in order to access your records. Or have you ever clicked on a headline of a news story in a Google News feed and find that you're not allowed to just go read the story because it is behind a paywall? You have to pay for a subscription to the newspaper first and get a username and password to use to read their material. That's because it's stored in the deep web. Most of us who use the web a lot are very familiar with the ClearNet and the deep web. But beyond the deep web is another part of the web that most of us know little or nothing about. We may have never even heard before that it exists. This is the dark web. The dark web is a part of the World Wide Web that has resources stored in a separate set of networks that are part of the internet. It's made up of 10% or so of the deep web. You can't get there using your regular web browser like Chrome or Firefox. You have to download special software which will allow you to enter this dark underbelly of the web. The main version of this type of browser that's available is called Tor, which stands for The Onion Router. The technology for this browser was originally developed by United States Naval Research Laboratory employees with the purpose of protecting U.S. intelligence communications online. Most funding for its development over the years has come from the federal government, but it is now available for the average person to use also. What is special about the dark web? In particular, this. The dark web is a place where everyone, from owners of websites to individuals who are visiting websites, is anonymous. It's also a place where you can visit and no one is able to track your movements. Through the dark web, private computer networks can communicate and conduct business anonymously without divulging identifying information like location. Communication between dark web users is highly encrypted, allowing users to talk, blog, and share files confidentially. The Tor browser is what makes this possible. The word onion is in the name of the browser because the technology it uses creates layer upon layer of encryption protection, just like the layers of an onion. The dark web is also a place where there is little to no censorship of much of anything. As you might guess, it is where you can find black markets for drugs, computer hackers offering their services, shady deals of all kinds, a wide variety of porn, and illegal activity of all kinds. But with the guarantee of confidentiality, it's also where you can find people who live under oppressive regimes in certain parts of the world, able to communicate with one another without much fear of being tracked down. You can also find whistleblowing sites and freewheeling political discussions, and hoaxes and conspiracy theories. Lots of hoaxes and conspiracy theories. Throughout 99.9% of history, individuals shared information with one another face to face. The invention of writing added the ability to communicate over distance, but even with the best of postal delivery systems, that method took quite a bit of time. The invention of the telegraph and then the telephone allowed the communication over distance to become instantaneous, but even then, an individual could only communicate with one or a handful of individuals at a time. What is going to be of most value and interest to us in exploring the QAnon movement is how, because of the internet and social media like Twitter and Facebook, one single person can now share information and opinions with not just one person at a time, but can instantly broadcast it to hundreds or thousands or millions of people. And how the average individual can cooperate through social media with not just one other person, but with hundreds or thousands or millions to develop hoaxes and conspiracy theories. And how individuals can make plans for activities out in the real world through online social media, not with just a handful of close friends, but with hundreds or thousands or millions of other people. And the reason they can do all this is because they have access to both the ClearNet and the dark web. Let's complete the simple internet lexicon we've been building by taking a very brief look at the places on the internet where people go specifically not to find entertainment or things to buy, but to communicate directly with other people. From the earliest days of the internet, when most people accessed it by using their telephone to dial into a central computer somewhere, the place to go to discuss things with others was internet message boards. They still exist today. These digital message boards are comparable to the kind of old-fashioned corkboard bulletin boards out in the real world in places like laundromats, where people use thumbtacks to put up scraps of paper or 3x5 cards with messages on them for other people to look at. This might include announcements of dates and times for community meetings, descriptions of objects for sale, or maybe even a photocopy of a cartoon from a newspaper. On an internet message board, you can find the same types of messages that people have created on their own computers and sent to the message board, where it will show up on a list of messages on the computer screens of anyone visiting the message board. There are two kinds of messages that can be posted on message boards. The first is just a regular text message, typed directly from a user's keyboard into a message box on the board screen, and then posted by the board software onto a continuous message list. Many message boards accept only these kind of messages. If you visit such a message board and type in a request to look at all messages that include a topic of interest to you, such as football, the message board can do a search on that term by looking through all the text of the various messages and display for you the results. But there's another kind of message that can be posted. You can use an art or photo program like Photoshop to create a different kind of message. For this kind of message, you create an image that may have text, photos, diagrams, or illustrations all combined together. You then save the display you've created on the screen as a type of computer image, such as a JPEG or a GIF. Everything in this image is all frozen together as a single object. The letters making up the text are no longer separate letters. They are just a picture of whole words or sentences. They cannot be searched in the way the text of an MS Word document can be searched. Some message boards either specialize in or at least allow these kinds of pictorial messages to be posted. I mention all this about image messages because one of the message boards I want to introduce to you is this extremely popular one called 4chan. As of June 2020, 4chan receives more than 22 million unique visitors monthly, with approximately 900,000 posts made daily. 4chan is particularly an image board where participants post images and invite others to discuss them. Like this image that was posted on 4chan on August 10th, 2019. Before this shocking news about the mysterious death of Jeffrey Epstein hit the mainstream media news on that day. 4chan participants are welcome to post image messages about any topic of their choice, which may include anything from video games, music, literature, fitness, and sports, to current news and politics. There are separate sections for a wide variety of topics. You might even find lots of photos of cute animals. But 4chan is also an anonymous board, so some users feel free to post and promote controversial material, everything from white supremacy to hardcore porn. And 4chan has very little censorship from moderators. User discretion is advised because there will be no warning on just what might pop up in a photo on a page you open on 4chan. No, I've not visited 4chan and don't plan to, but I've read a lot about it now. And 4chan has a very special part to play in the world of QAnon we will be exploring later. Speaking of image messages, though, those are not limited to the dark web. A specific type of image message is found by the billions all over both the clear net and the dark web these days. These are internet memes. The word meme on the web usually refers to a photo or illustration that has some text superimposed on it. The content may project humor, information, inspiration, exhortation, or even political opinion. It is created with the particular intent that it be passed along to friends on social media, who will pass it on to their friends, who will pass it on to their friends. The hope of the original creator was that it would be spread as widely as possible. Just as an interesting aside, the term meme was invented by evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins for his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, as a concept to use in discussion of evolutionary principles that might help explain the spread of ideas and cultural phenomena. Since it was invented long before the internet, it obviously didn't start out having anything to do with the internet, or anything to do with cute or funny cat pictures. As explained on Wikipedia, a meme is an idea, behavior, or style that becomes a fad and spreads by means of imitation from person to person within a culture, and often carries symbolic meaning, representing a particular phenomenon or theme. A meme acts as a unit for carrying cultural ideas, symbols, or practices that can be transmitted from one mind to another through writing, speech, gestures, rituals, or other imitable phenomena with a mimicked theme. Supporters of the concept regard memes as cultural analogs to genes, in that they self-replicate, mutate, and respond to selective pressures. By the way, you don't have to go down into the dark web to find really disgusting stuff on the internet. One such place that is available on the ClearNet part of the World Wide Web is a site that was originally called 8chan, but now has the title 8kun. Like its dark web cousin 4chan, it is also strictly an image board. Wikipedia describes it this way. The site has been linked to white supremacism, neo-Nazism, the alt-right, racism and anti-Semitism, hate crimes, and multiple mass shootings. The site is also known for its role as a forum for child pornography. 8kun is the last website I'll be mentioning that has an X rating. The rest that will be covered in this brief internet lexicon are frequented by a broader section of the population. Regular users of sites such as 4chan and 8chan are known to use the term normies, a snarky reference to normal, to describe that broader section. It refers to people whose tastes, lifestyle, web browsing habits, and favored news sources are mainstream. We will meet this term later when exploring the world of QAnon. Here is the last old-style message board I will mention. Reddit is a place where regular visitors discuss and debate all sorts of topics, most of them not nearly as disgusting as those you'll find on 8chan or down in the dark web on 4chan and other related sites. That doesn't mean that it doesn't include topics that are very controversial, though. It does, including, as we will see later, QAnon. I have visited Reddit numerous times over the years in relation to my research. Users on Reddit typically give themselves anonymous usernames and identify themselves on posts with the letter U for user, like this, U/fake name. They post on a variety of what are called subreddit boards, each dedicated to a specific topic area, and each given a short identifier of r/ for subreddit, followed by an identifying word or phrase. Examples of subreddit boards include r/Monster Hunter World, r/Male Fashion Advice, or r/No Stupid Questions. And now we get to the social media websites that are familiar to most people who spend any time at all on the World Wide Web. In recent times, the one shown here is probably the most familiar one. The reason most people are familiar with Twitter these days, even if they don't ever go on the web themselves, is because it is the favorite online hangout of the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. Messages on Twitter are called tweets. Originally, each tweet was limited to containing only 140 characters. Recently, that was doubled to 280, which still puts a real limitation on those who are inclined to write long-winded messages. Almost every day, there are reports in the news about one or more or many outlandish tweets that Trump has posted from his personal iPhone to Twitter. When you want to share a tweet with your friends that you've seen by someone else, you are said to be retweeting it. Donald Trump almost daily retweets many tweets by others. Quite frequently, such tweets were originally posted by unsavory sources such as white supremacists. Users identify themselves on Twitter by an @ sign followed by a nickname or real name. For example, @nobody'sfool or @johnsmith263. Donald Trump styles himself @realdonaldtrump. Tweeting is Donald's favorite pastime. He tweets from the White House and elsewhere on his own iPhone. He calls himself @therealdonaldtrump on Twitter and often has a very hard time keeping his tweets to just 280 characters. And he frequently surprises his staff by announcing important decisions in a tweet on Twitter before he's even informed those closest to him in his administration. Soon after its startup, the idea was introduced on Twitter of using the symbol that used to be used as the universal symbol for number, the one that looks like a little slanted tic-tac-toe board, to identify topic labels at the end of tweets. As the Merriam-Webster Online Learner's Dictionary puts it, as many of you probably know, using a hashtag in Twitter helps categorize your message and makes it possible for others to find your tweet when they search for messages on the same topic. If you include the hashtag Snowden in your tweet, for example, anyone who searches for hashtag Snowden in Twitter will see your tweet. Hashtags make it easy to quickly find messages about a topic that interests you. The software on the Twitter website keeps a running log of all the hashtag search terms people use to look for tweets. It provides a regular report on this so that participants can see what topics are currently the most popular. An individual hashtag topic is said to be trending if it is increasingly popular. Both Twitter in general and the concept of hashtags and trending hashtags in particular will be very important as we explore the world of QAnon. Trump's tweeting obsession is often depicted in political cartoons, where he is frequently referred to snarkily as Tweeter-in-Chief. Trump's obsession with Twitter and tweeting will play a major role in our discussion of QAnon. We'll briefly touch on two more social media websites as we complete this short lexicon of internet terms. Instagram is a variety of the earlier image boards that we've discussed, but instead of individuals just randomly posting images on a list in among those posted by other people, each participant on Instagram has their own unique page on the website. It's similar to an individual bulletin board you might keep on the wall in your bedroom. Participants post images, along with video clips 60 seconds long or less, on their own page, with or without a short description in text next to them. Most often, the images are photographs actually taken by the Instagram member themselves. The photo of a lighthouse shown here is one my daughter took in Michigan and posted on her Instagram page. Hashtags are used on Instagram posts just as they are on Twitter, to tag the photo with words that people can search on to come across it. You can see on this example the hashtags that my daughter put on the lighthouse photo. If other Instagram participants search on a certain hashtag and find a picture they really like, they may decide to become a follower of the person who posted it. Then they will get notices from Instagram when someone they are following adds new pictures to their page. Visitors are welcome to add short comments about the images and perhaps share them with their own circle of Instagram followers. The nature of the Instagram social media website makes it less likely to be involved than some other social media sites in the spread of controversial topics like partisan politics or conspiracy theories such as QAnon. On the other hand, the nature of the Facebook social media website makes it very much involved in such controversial topics and conspiracy theories. As with Instagram, each Facebook participant has their own unique page. They invite anyone they want to become part of a list of what are called Facebook friends, to have access to what they post on their page, and to interact with them in conversations. A participant's friends can either go directly to their page when they want to see what's new, or they can choose to follow the participant. That means they will get copies of what their friend posts in a list on their own page all day long, every day. They have many more options of the types of items they can post than is available to users of sites such as Instagram. They can type their own thoughts and opinions into text messages to post. They can post photos, cartoons, drawings, charts, or humorous or serious memes, or any other kind of still images. They can post links to news articles, or videos on YouTube, or any other type of content that's elsewhere on the web. They can directly post on Facebook videos that they've created themselves, or ones created by others. If they see something they like that was posted by one of their friends, they can click a button below it that says Share, and it will immediately be sent out to everyone on their friends list. And this is how we get to our final term in the lexicon. Going viral on social media. The various types of social media on both the dark web and the clear net have been growing at a phenomenal rate in recent years. The statistics included in this list are probably already outdated, but show you the incredible potential and opportunity in modern times for one person or a small group of people to reach a gigantic audience with an idea, a message, a plan, and conspiracy theories. And it only costs them the price of an internet hookup to their home, likely less than $50 a month. If a piece of news, a message, an image, or a video is said to be going viral, it means that it is spreading around the internet in an exponential way, becoming popular in just a matter of hours or days by being shared by from thousands to millions of people on social media, such as Twitter and Facebook, just as the novel coronavirus spreads in the real world. Now that we've established some of the basic vocabulary necessary to discuss this subject, it's time to take a specific look at the QAnon phenomenon. If you didn't know better, you might think that the QAnon phenomenon is something that sprang out of nowhere in early 2018. Because looking back at online news archives, that's when you see the first mainstream newspaper articles making vague references to the term. But this is an illusion. If you know where to look, including down in the dark web, you will quickly realize that the phenomenon has a prehistory. And this prehistory is important to understand in order to understand the rise of QAnon and the power and influence of its messages among a growing segment of the U.S. population, including that part that lives in the White House in Washington, D.C. So let's have a quick overview of that prehistory. This is John Podesta, a former White House chief of staff under Obama and current chair in 2016 of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. In March 2016, his personal Gmail account was hacked. Tens of thousands of his emails, many of them related to his work for Clinton, were grabbed by the hackers, who were alleged to have been from a spy group connected with a Russian military agency. This is more than you wish you'd seen of former Congressman Anthony Weiner of New York. He was married at the time of this photo to Huma Abedin. Huma Abedin had met Hillary Clinton in 1996 when Huma was assigned as a college intern to work at the White House as an assistant to Hillary. The two became close friends from then on. Abedin had been Deputy Chief of Staff for Hillary during her years as Secretary of State, and in 2016 was Vice Chairman of Hillary's presidential campaign. Anthony gained a reputation for having an unstoppable obsession with what is called sexting. That's the slang word for sending sexually suggestive and sometimes sexually explicit text messages and photos to someone with your phone. Anthony had long been sexting on the sly to young women throughout his marriage. As you can see evidenced in the insert photo in this post cover, taken by Weiner while sexting to someone while his small son lies next to him in bed, he was terrible at covering up this obsession. In fact, it was one of these incidents that led to his ouster from Congress in 2011. But it didn't slow him down, and by September 2016, his follies were back in the news. This time it was worse than his previous escapades because he was charged with this kind of explicit sexting exchange with an underage girl, a 15-year-old from North Carolina. A laptop that Anthony shared with his wife Huma was seized by authorities as part of the investigation into the underage texting case. And thus, we arrive at what this foolish incident involving a very foolish man has to ultimately do with QAnon. But before we make that connection, we need to introduce one more player. This is the infamous Australian activist Julius Assange, founder of the infamous WikiLeaks organization. WikiLeaks somehow obtained the Podesta emails and throughout October and early November that year published them online. The contents of many of them were embarrassing or damaging, some even damning to Hillary Clinton's campaign, and were considered to be influential to some extent in her loss of the election to Donald Trump. But the impact on politics was not what interested a slew of people on some of the internet information and discussion boards discussed earlier, including Reddit and Twitter. They homed in on a few emails that talked about, of all things, plans by Podesta and his brother Tony related to eating pizza. Before you knew what had happened, they'd come up with some really strange speculation about those emails. And part of the speculation involved Anthony Weiner. Inside the digital memory of Anthony's wife's laptop, the police discovered emails that were pertinent to the Hillary Clinton WikiLeaks situation. And that prompted FBI Director James Comey to reopen that investigation 11 days before the November 8, 2016 U.S. presidential election. The content of some of the emails on that laptop became accessible to the public. And ultimately, on October 30th, 2016, a Twitter poster who gave his name as David Goldberg, said to be a New York lawyer who regularly posted white supremacist material, falsely claimed in this tweet that the New York City Police Department, the NYPD, had discovered a pedophilia ring linked to members of the Democratic Party while searching through the emails on that laptop. Given that Weiner had just been caught soliciting a 15-year-old girl, this speculation wasn't totally without some logic. The story was later posted on fake news websites, starting with something called Your News Wire, which cited a 4chan post from earlier that year. The Your News Wire article was subsequently spread by pro-Trump websites, including subjectpolitics.com, which added the claim that the NYPD had raided Hillary Clinton's property. The conservative Daily Post ran a headline claiming the Federal Bureau of Investigation had confirmed the theory. Within a few weeks, a false rumor that Hillary Clinton and her top aides were involved in various crimes snowballed into a wild conspiracy theory that they were running a child trafficking ring out of a Washington pizza parlor, and thus this theory acquired the name Pizzagate. You see, John and Tony Podesta had chatted in some of their emails about going to a place called the Comet Ping Pong and Pizza Parlor in a quiet neighborhood in a Washington, D.C. area suburb 4 miles northwest of the White House, owned by a friend of John's named James Alefantis. Other emails occasionally mentioned other Democratic operatives regarding pizza plans, including an arrangement to hold a small campaign event at Comet Ping Pong. Sounds innocent enough, but one poster on Reddit shared that sometimes the initials CP, which are the initials for cheese pizza, stand for child pornography among pedophiles who hang out on 4chan and other dark web bulletin boards. This idea was quickly picked up on 4chan and expanded, as you can see on this November 3rd post on 4chan. So even though the Comet Ping Pong was a happy place, popular for families who gathered to eat pizza and hot dogs and play ping pong and foosball, if you stared long enough at one of their menus and stared long enough at the Podesta emails that talked about ordering from one of those menus, you could wonder if all those food words really represented a code language used by pedophiles. Well, you could wonder that if you had a mind slanted towards investigating conspiracy theories, which describes millions of people in the world these days, including this young woman who just 3 weeks later on Twitter who tweeted her version of the chart of the supposed pedophilia code from the earlier 4chan post. If those words did constitute a nefarious code, then when those Democrats were placing orders, supposedly for various items, they were really requesting access to underage children of various types. Children who were supposedly being kept as sex slaves in hidden rooms under the pizza parlor. Eventually, the theory was expanded to insist that nearby businesses were also involved in the child trafficking ring and that tunnels ran from the basement of the Comet Pizza Parlor to horror chambers under the other businesses. Another part of the conspiracy theory was a supposed link between the Podesta brothers and a famous child abduction case that had long been in the news. A 3-year-old girl from the United Kingdom named Madeleine McCann disappeared from her family's vacation residence at a resort in Portugal clear back in 2007, and the case was never solved. Back at the time, computer sketches were made of possible suspects based on descriptions by people who had seen suspicious activity the night of the crime. The sensational abduction was covered in the news widely around the world, and thus the photos were distributed internationally. These 2 photos show one pair that was sent out. As you can see, there's a bit of an unusual resemblance between these 2 photos and photos of the Podesta brothers, and thus these photos were widely used as evidence by Pizzagate theorists to link John and Tony to the famous abduction. The problem was these sketches weren't of 2 different individuals. They were based on vague descriptions by 2 different witnesses of one man. This crucial detail was always left out of Pizzagate rants. In addition, the 2 witnesses described the man they saw as white, aged between 20 and 40. In 2007, John Podesta was 58 and Tony was 64. Pizzagate theorists also shared the information that the Podestas were in Portugal at the exact same time as the crime. However, that information came from only one source, an anonymous person quoted on a single website. A conspiracy-minded news site that reported, among other things, that the Titanic was deliberately sunk and that the Queen of England is a reptilian alien. None of this contrary evidence negating the theories about Podesta made any difference to Pizzagate promoters, of course. They just went on to the next tidbit of evidence. This photo was found on the Instagram account of James Alefantis, owner of Comet Ping Pong. It was claimed to be proof that he was a pedophile because the English translation of the Italian word l'enfant had his t-shirt declaring creepily, "I love the child." But see, there are two really big problems with this proof. First, that isn't James Alefantis. It's a friend of his who was co-owner of another Washington restaurant. And the name of that restaurant is L'Enfant Cafe Bar. His t-shirt was promotion for his restaurant. And in case you're wondering about the name of the restaurant, it wasn't named to point to a child either. It was named after Pierre L'Enfant, a well-known colonist from France who served under George Washington in the Revolutionary War. In fact, after the war, Pierre L'Enfant, an engineer and architect, was commissioned in 1791 by Washington to plan the city that ultimately became Washington, D.C. But, of course, those picky little details didn't change the minds of Pizzagate aficionados, and they just kept building their Comet Pizza case. Eventually, the burgeoning story was picked up and spread widely by other fake news websites, such as Alex Jones's InfoWars. Wild conspiracy theories have been a feature of societies throughout the world from time immemorial, including conspiracies involving sex trafficking. Anti-Catholic sentiments were extremely popular in America and England in the 1800s, fueled by nativist resentment of Irish and German Catholic immigrants. A cottage industry of lurid literature cropped up to support their alleged plots, with maybe the most lurid being The Awful Disclosures of Maria Monk. The book, written by a woman who claimed to be a nun in Montreal, alleged that nuns of the religious Hospitallers of St. Joseph were systematically assaulted by neighboring priests, supposedly by entering the nuns' convent from their seminary next door, through a secret tunnel between the two buildings. If a baby resulted, it was baptized and then slain and dumped into a lime pit in the basement. It also alleged that nuns who fought back were offed and that priests were incapable of sin. Sales of the book skyrocketed immediately among Protestants, and it was practically an overnight bestseller. Conspiracy theories about the Roman Catholic Church had already been running amok for years when the Maria Monk book became available. In fact, it was only one of over 20 best-selling convent tales published before the Civil War, including such juicy titles as The Escaped Nun, The Female Jesuit, Priests' Prisons for Women, The Captive Nun, and The Haunted Convent. But Maria's story was the most popular and enduring, probably because it was a really juicy first-person report, the closest thing to porn many readers had ever read. Although the original was not illustrated, later publishers quickly jumped on the bandwagon with illustrated reprints that could add to the salacious qualities of the story. Historian Richard Hofstadter called the Maria Monk book, in his famous 1964 essay titled The Paranoid Style in American Politics, probably the most widely read contemporary book in the United States before Uncle Tom's Cabin. Some reports say Maria's book had sold 300,000 copies by the time of the Civil War. Yes, the book caused a massive uproar among the anti-Catholic rabble of the time. But very quickly, investigation of the claims in the book showed Maria didn't write it. Records established she'd spent most of the time she claimed to be a nun in a nunnery. She was actually a patient in a mental institution, and the whole thing was revealed to be a hoax. Within 2 years of the first publication of the book, it had been soundly refuted as a hoax, with extensive, undeniable documentation, including a major investigation by Colonel William Stone, a Protestant newspaper editor from New York City. He actually took a team of investigators to the convent in question in October 1836, with Maria's book in hand, which contained extensive descriptions by Maria of the interior of the convent. After seeing the inside of the convent for himself and later interviewing Maria, he concluded she had never been inside the building, let alone kept captive as a sex slave there. Shortly after that, Maria went into obscurity, turned to prostitution, and by 1849 was arrested in New York for stealing money from a John, imprisoned, and died there in 1849. And, of course, that was the end of that wild-eyed conspiracy theory. Well, no, not really. The book pretty much never went out of print, as you can see by the examples shown here. It was resurrected and republished, in particular during any time of a rise in anti-Catholic sentiment in the U.S., often related to immigration from Roman Catholic areas of Europe like Ireland and Italy, such as in the 1870s and the early 20th century. Each time it was enthusiastically devoured by Protestants, believed as God's truth, and passed on to friends. Republication has continued right up to today. Several editions are available on Amazon, including in hardbound, paperback, and Kindle. And the reviews by purchasers indicate it is not being bought just as an example of early American hoax. Some readers praise it as being eye-opening and make it abundantly clear they accept it not as fiction or hoax, but as God's truth, and intend to urge friends and family to read it. As you might expect, the recent revelations of pedophile priests in the Catholic Church have made the stories of Maria Monk far more believable than they might otherwise have been. I bring Maria Monk into the contemporary story of Pizzagate so that viewers can understand that what happened from 2016 to the present in the Pizzagate saga, and later the whole QAnon phenomenon, is to be totally expected, given the propensity of large portions of the population to be easily swept along into accepting conspiracy theories. Once the genie of such a massive conspiracy theory is sprung from its lamp, it's nigh unto impossible to cram him back in. No matter how goofy the Pizzagate theory sounded to the average American at the time, it began spreading, and no matter how many times and how carefully newscasters and police and other reputable authorities would explain to the public that the theory had no merit at all, those already enmeshed in building and expanding and doing their own investigation about the theory refused to abandon it. It only gained steam. In December 2016, all this theorizing left the realm of theory and speculation and jumped into the real world in the person of a young man from North Carolina named Edgar Welch. Welch was 28 and a father of 2 young daughters. He became swept up in the Pizzagate conspiracy theory world and devoured online material about it, including listening to Alex Jones rant about it. Edgar believed it all and decided if no one was going to do anything about it, he'd step forward and rescue those children under the comet ping pong. Thus it was on December 4th, 2016, just 1 month after that conspiracy theory took off on 4chan, he headed out on a 5-hour trip to Washington, D.C. While on the road, he made what he may have thought was a farewell video on his cell phone for his 2 little girls. He expected to perhaps become a martyr as he carried out his plan.
Standing up for you. For other children just like you. Like I've always told you, we have a duty to protect people who can't protect themselves. I hope you understand that one day. I love all y'all.
Edgar Welch arrived at Comet Ping Pong while friends and families were enjoying an afternoon of fun and pizza eating. Storming in with an AR-15 rifle and a handgun, he sent guests and employees scrambling for the door. He eventually discharged 3 rounds from the rifle, one of them evidently to bust the lock off of a closet door that he assumed led to the basement of horrors. A few minutes later, after he had miserably failed to find any evidence at all of a child sex trafficking ring in the basement of the pizza parlor, he emerged to turn himself in to the police who had arrived. No, he found no dungeon in the basement holding children, no tunnels to nearby businesses. In fact, he discovered there was no basement under Comet Ping Pong. Welch was sentenced in 2017 to 4 years in prison for his escapade. So you just suppose any of that, including screwing up his life and keeping him from his daughters for 4 years, dissuaded him from his belief in the conspiracy? Don't be silly. Did hearing about his experience dissuade any of his comrades in conspiracy in America? Don't be silly. In an interview with the New York Times shortly after his arrest, Welch said that he regretted how he had handled the situation, but did not dismiss the conspiracy theory and rejected the description of it as fake news. And in fact, some conspiracy theorists at the time speculated the shooting was a staged attempt to discredit their investigations into the conspiracy. Welch's girlfriend put up a Facebook page honoring him shortly after his arrest, which is still up on Facebook now in 2020. Although some visitors left nasty messages calling him a fool, there were others who called him a hero. Someone named Michelle wrote, "You are a true hero to children and us, the surviving adults of abuse. God bless you and be with you and your family always." And someone named Phil wrote, "Edgar, I can't think of anyone more courageous than you." No, real-world proof against elaborate conspiracy theories like Pizzagate is usually worthless to get those enmeshed and invested in them to abandon the theories. As, for example, these protesters in March 2017, barely 3 months after Welch proved there were no children held captive as sex slaves in a basement below the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria. There were no such children. There wasn't even a basement. But the information didn't fit with the elaborate theory they'd created in their heads. So these March protesters just made slight adjustments in their heads to solve the cognitive dissonance. Maybe the location was wrong, but somewhere the vast ring of elite liberals have dungeons where they keep such children, and they were going to be part of exposing and destroying this vile abomination. Because, you see, at some point, some of Pizzagate's proponents, including General Michael Flynn's son, Michael, evolved the conspiracy into a broader conspiracy they dubbed Pedogate. According to this theory, which is flourishing even as I record this video, a satanic cabal of elites of a mysterious New World Order operates international child sex trafficking rings. In fact, there's a variation on the conspiracy referred to as Pedo Wood that insists there's a large satanic cabal of Hollywood elites and others in the entertainment industry that also rape and then kill children regularly, including, as an example, Tom Hanks. Yes, there is a very active group of people on the internet regularly spreading information and commentary on this hashtag. Hashtag PedoHanks. And lest you think the conspiracy theorists even let go at least of the idea of the pedophilia conspiracy theories being involved with pizza, have a look at these protesters in New York on August 12th, 2020, barely 3 weeks right before now as I record this narration. And then there is this article from the New York Times in July 2020. Yes, the Pizzagate theory is still alive and well in 2020, almost 4 years after Mr. Welch stormed the Comet Ping Pong Pizza Parlor. As the Times article explained, it is taking new forms now and still being spread by social media sites. One story described in the Times article tells how celebrity Justin Bieber got swept up by the current hysteria over the conspiracy theory. 4 minutes into a video that was posted on Instagram last month, June 2020, Justin Bieber leaned into the camera and adjusted the front of his black knit beanie. For some of his 130 million followers, it was a signal. In the video, someone had posted a comment asking Mr. Bieber to touch his hat if he had been a victim of a child trafficking ring known as Pizzagate. Thousands of comments were flooding in, and there was no evidence Mr. Bieber had even seen that message. But the pop star's innocuous gesture set off a flurry of online activity, which highlighted the resurgence of one of social media's early conspiracy theories. Viewers quickly uploaded hundreds of videos online analyzing Mr. Bieber's actions. The videos were translated into Spanish, Portuguese, and other languages, amassing millions of views. Fans then left thousands of comments on Mr. Bieber's social media posts asking him if he was safe. Within days, search for Justin Bieber and Pizzagate soared on Google, and the hashtag #SaveBieber started trending. Yes, the Pizzagate conspiracy is still alive and well and spreading in America. But it's now become part of a much grander conspiracy that has aspirations to taking over the whole world. We are now ready to introduce that part of this ongoing saga in the next entry in this series, QAnon, Storm Warnings.